shillings as loan from international lenders to fill in the deficit occasioned by the coronavirus pandemic. Let's now speak to our business news editor Henry Githaiga on this budget, the expectations and what it portends for Kenyans. Henry, I trust you're well. Now, what should Kenyans expect tomorrow?
That's actually the only thing that is a mystery. What they should expect is what is a mystery, because the budget making process has changed. So we already know the figures, we know the numbers. What we are expecting to hear tomorrow is how the Cabinet Secretary will address the shortfall in raising funds that KRA is expected to experience due to COVID-19. But Kenyans are also looking for the government to cushion them against the effects of COVID-19. Remember, a lot of businesses have had to either scale back or close down as a result of the requirements that have been put in place to fight COVID-19. We are not able to import some of the goods that we would be looking to import from, say, countries like China. Most countries are on lockdown. They're not exporting. Manufacturers are seeing a decrease in demand for certain goods. So what Kenyans will be expecting to hear is how exactly the government intends to cushion various sectors of the economy. But the elephant in the room, of course, will be the job losses. About 5.9 million jobs are at risk, a huge proportion of that being in the tourism sector. And of course, there's a trickle-down effect, because if there are more job losses or if there are more pay cuts, then there is what we call the rate of dependency goes up, which means that someone who could sustain themselves now is dependent either on the state or on other people. So the burden gets passed on from person to person. For instance, if today one of us were to lose their jobs, we'd look to our family members to help support us, and then that increases the rate of dependency between us and our family members, and that trickles down to the rest of the economy. If you have a help at home, that means you have to let her go. So they're looking for ways in which the government will either be able to kickstart the economy so that there are no more job losses, and also how they will be able to help businesses recover so that even for those that are on half pay, their income levels come back up to par. Ashley.
Quite tough times. Now, you talked about revenue collections. Now, meeting our target has been quite a challenge. This year's target was 1.6 trillion shillings, which is unlikely to be met considering what has been happening, the pandemic and all that. So then what happens next?
So even for the current year, the original target was 2 trillion shillings, revised downwards to 1.8 trillion shillings. As of March, the government had only collected 1.2 billion shillings, which means they have about 600 billion shillings to go. In the month of April alone, the government was behind schedule with 20 billion shillings. So this means that it will be tough times, especially given that even the measures taken to cushion Kenyans include KRA losing out on some of their funds. There are people who've dropped out totally out of the tax bracket for one reason or another. There are those people who've lost their jobs, but even the measures put in place to cushion Kenyans, which means that quite a proportion of people who earn below to 24,000 shillings are no longer being taxed. Companies that would pay 30% corporation tax now are paying 25%. The highest tax limit for pay as you earn was 30%. It's now at 25%. But Kenyans still feel that more needs to be done, because even for those, even for that 5% reduction in tax in the taxes that they pay every month on payee, most of them have seen a 25% 25% salary cut. Others have seen a 50% cut. So they're still struggling in one way or another, which means that ripples on to KRA, which will have to find a way to either collect more money, or the government will have to borrow more money. Remember, already we are at 6.28 trillion shillings in terms of debt. Parliament raised the debt ceiling to 9 trillion shillings. We project that in the coming budget, if we were to fully fund the budget, we'd have to borrow well over 1 trillion shillings, which would then increase the level of debt, and which is a key concern, because even in the budget that Okur Yatani will be presenting tomorrow, there will be almost a trillion shillings, which is 904 billion shillings that will be paid in debt and interest. So this is quite a big scare. Parliament has already raised the red flag on this, but there's nothing much that can be done at the moment. So what we would expect to see is, even after the budget is presented and after the finance bill is passed, there may be a series of supplementary budgets or revisions to either move funds from one ministry to another or to cut back on the spending of government.
Finally, you talked about debt being a concern. Are we likely to see this cycle, because it's been borrowing after borrowing after borrowing, end anytime soon?
Well, that actually is the big question for everyone, because at the end of the day, government still needs to finance its spending. And if you look at the correlation between government and business, it's quite huge, because government is one of the biggest consumers of most of the manufactured goods, including cement for construction and various other sectors. And so it means that government still would need to borrow. How to tame that cycle is the big question. People have been talking for a long time about bringing in more people into the tax bracket. The government proposing to look at even the digital economy, to tax them further. But everybody keeps saying that at the end of the day, some of the businesses that are being done online already have pay corporation tax or turnover tax or a tax in one form or another. So it's how the government will have to be more innovative and creative in terms of looking for new ways to generate taxes, but also to create more opportunities for the private sector to grow, so that the more the private sector expands, the more they're able to collect in taxes in terms of both corporation taxes and pay-as-you-earn taxes, and more jobs created in the economy equals more tax collections for KRA.
All right, let's see. I hope most of our questions will be answered tomorrow. Thank you very much, Henry Githaiga, our business news editor, for breaking it down for us. Now, to politics, Ford Kenya Party leader Moses Wetangula has petitioned the Political Parties Dispute Tribunal to stop the registrar of political parties from effecting changes in the leadership of the party.